Hi everyone, I hope you're all doing really well and welcome back to my podcast, Life of an Artrepreneur. Thank you so much for all of the amazing feedback from last week's episode where I was talking to Danielle Verbeeten. She's done so much and she says that she's not, but she actually has done loads. She gave us such an insight into what it's like to actually illustrate and write your own children's book and the whole sort of publishing process and everything behind that. We spoke about loads of things really, but I'd say that's probably the main thing we spoke about. So go and check out last week's episode if you've not watched that already. Danielle was great to have on the podcast and I'd love to have her back on at some point. I can't believe that we're now in October. I feel like this year has just gone so quickly. My workshop is literally around the corner. It's in less than 2 weeks. So that's something to look forward to and to prepare for, big style. I've still got so much to do for it, but I'm getting there. I'm filming loads of stuff and I'm going to make it into a YouTube video talking all about what you need to kind of prepare if you're putting on your own art workshop. So that should be coming soon in the next week or so. I get so many lovely messages about this podcast and how much value it's giving people in terms of like starting or growing and running their own art business and all the different aspects that I talk about on each episode. Every week I get such lovely messages, but this week I actually got a message from Ella about my podcast, like quite a lengthy message about my podcast. She's only recently found my podcast, so she was listening to a few episodes one after another. So in the message she was just saying how helpful each episode has been and was giving me suggestions for upcoming episodes. One of them being about pet portraits and to do a full episode basically on how to be a pet portrait artist, because most people who listen to this podcast probably are either a pet portrait artist already, either full-time or part-time, or you do it on the side or you want to get into it. So in this episode, I'm going to talk about how to actually be a pet portrait artist and the whole process of that. So you might already be full-time or part-time or just wanting to start out, whatever it is. I think this episode will still be relevant because I think it's interesting actually to hear how other artists kind of structure their work, what a normal day looks like, how much commitment it is to actually be a pet portrait artist, and just some of the things that you might not have considered if you're hoping to grow your art business or kind of get into being a pet portrait artist. Hopefully by me going through my structure and kind of what I do. I think if you do this as a hobby, which is, I think everyone kind of starts with it being a hobby and you kind of fall into it with the more commissions you get and the more you kind of branch out into other things. But I think if you want to become a pet portrait artist and you're doing it as a hobby currently, first things first, it's not easy. You need so much concentration for long periods of time. You need to find a method, whether that's music or a podcast or just completely shutting yourself in a room for a few hours to really get into the drawing zone and just completely concentrate for like quite a length of time, because it's very easy to get distracted and then you don't actually make much progress. Obviously you'll know that already if you kind of do this part-time or as a hobby. You know how long things take you to do. But if you're wanting to go into this full-time, there is a lot to consider first. Obviously there's a lot I could get into, and all of these topics that I'm going to be touching on, I've kind of mostly talked about them before in previous episodes, but way more in depth, whether that's growing on social media or how to start or loads of different things. But I don't think I've done an episode so far where I've sort of broken down the whole structure and process as to what it means and what goes into being a pet portrait artist like full time. So if there is anything that I touch on in this episode that you want to hear a little bit more about or you want to dive deeper into that, then have a look at some of my previous episodes, because the likelihood is I probably have done a previous episode on that specific topic more in depth. So let's get into it then. So I'm going to try and be straight to the point and give you an insight into what I actually do in terms of the commissions pet portrait artist side of things. Firstly, if you're wanting to be an artist in general full time, I think pet portraits are always a good thing to get into initially, because there's always going to be people out there who want their pet drawn. I think that is always going to be an option. And initially that is really good short-term income, and then over time obviously you can grow. You can raise your prices little and often to get more of that stable income. But pet portraits are definitely a good avenue to go down if you're wanting to be a full-time coloured pencil artist in the future. And I think after doing so many commissions over so many years, you really develop your drawing skills and you improve so much. I sold my first commission to someone who wasn't like friends and family, I think in 2017. I could be wrong, but I think it's 2017. So that was 7 years ago, and sometimes it comes up as like a memory on Facebook. It was a horse, actually, the first one that I drew for someone else. And I look back at it and I think that is actually crazy how much improvement. I know it's been 7 years, so obviously you're bound to improve in that time. But because I was drawing basically every single day, I was constantly learning and improving and perfecting my techniques and my skills and developing over time. So now the quality and the standard of my work is leagues above from that first horse drawing that I did like 7 years ago. And I think when you first go down that avenue of wanting to be a pet portrait artist, obviously you look at other pet portrait artists online on social media, see what they're doing. And it's kind of difficult sometimes to not compare like your work with theirs or vice versa. It's difficult because you want to be where they're at, but when you're just starting out, you kind of need to do those free ones for friends and family to build up more of that portfolio of work, which will then lead to more and more commissions. And you've literally got to start from there and build your way up. That's literally how everyone started. So start there and use other well-established pet portrait and wildlife artists as inspiration and as a bit of a goal, really, to see like where you can actually take it. There was a few artists that I looked at when I just first started out. I think a few years in, it was Bonnie Snowden that I really kind of looked up to, because she started teaching and she was exploring different avenues that I didn't even think were possible when it came to like colour pencils and pet portrait commissions. Like I just thought that was it. But the fact that her and so many other artists were doing so many other things, it kind of opens your eyes a little bit as to the possibilities and the opportunities that are out there. So just because you want to be a pet portrait artist does not mean that you're doing commission after commission after commission all day every day, because it might start off as that, but very quickly you'll find yourself wanting to kind of go down different avenues to split up your day. I think to concentrate for that long and to draw for that long is so intense, so you need to have breaks in between and also find time to stay creative for yourself as well, because commissions, you're obviously doing that work for someone else, and if you're doing that all the time, sometimes you don't leave time for yourself to explore your own creativity and make work for yourself. But yeah, that's just some things to consider before you even go down the pet portrait artist route. But if you have been a hobby pet portrait artist, or you're doing it part-time and want to go full-time, then here's some things to consider. So the first one is your materials. So I work in coloured pencils. I use the Caran d'Ache Luminance pencils and the Faber-Castell Polychromos mainly, with a few odd ones here and there. I love the white Caran d'Ache Museum Aquarelle pencil. That's my favourite white pencil ever. It's just incredible. I also use the ivory black Derwent drawing pencil because it's so pigmented and dark. I've stuck with those pencils for years because I know that they're super good quality, and you want to always use light fast pencils and good quality paper so the colours in your drawing don't fade over time. If someone's paying you quite a lot of money for a custom drawing, you don't want that drawing to then fade after a few years. You want that artwork to remain the exact same in terms of the colour and the quality, the vibrancy and like the richness from the day that they open the package to, 50 years down the line. You want the quality and the artwork to last a lifetime, basically. So invest in really good quality materials. It took me quite a while to figure out what paper surface I like working on the best. There's so many different options out there. So definitely try as many different paper surfaces as you can. Watch loads of YouTube videos. See what other artists are using, and you can order like one big sheet of one particular paper surface. It doesn't always have to be like a big pad. I actually order the big sheet of the extra white hot pressed Fabriano Artistico paper. That's my favourite paper. I use that for most of my tutorials, all of my commissions, and then I can cut it down to size, and usually I'll buy 10 sheets at once, and that'll last me for ages. It'll last me for like 6 months, if not more. Even invest in like other tools along with your colour pencils that might help improve the standard of your work. For example, the craft knife slice tool, which improves the like realistic quality in my work so much. Like I literally couldn't live without this now, but before it, I didn't even know it existed. And you can tell the difference between before I started using this and after I started using this. So when you're looking at other people's work and stuff, just have a look, or maybe ask questions. What did you use here? What paper you're working on? What pencils did you use? And you don't have to have all of that figured out before you start offering commissions to people. You can kind of figure that out along the way, but the quality of your work still needs to be at a high standard. I also think have everything in stock at all times. So your pencils, your paper, all of your packaging stuff, because you don't really want to be running out of anything, especially like paper or maybe the boxes that you're packaging up your commissions in. You don't want to be running out of anything if you've got a commission to complete by a certain date, and you don't want to be kind of rushing around ordering stock at the last minute. So try and stay organised and on top of things, and invest in good quality materials. The second thing is growing on social media. I actually did 2 episodes on this in previous weeks, where I went so in depth into how to grow on Instagram. I talked about Facebook and TikTok as well. But the most important thing is that you just documenting everything that you're doing. I think nowadays especially, people want to see more of the process and like how you got to the finished thing rather than just seeing the finished thing. And you can kind of reuse that content, make so many videos out of it. And you never know who's going to see those videos and how many more inquiries or clients you're going to get from that particular reel or video that you put online. So yeah, document what you can. When someone's looking for someone to draw their pets, they're probably going to be typing in pet portrait artist, and you need to be the person that they click on. And when they go to like your Instagram profile or your Facebook page or whatever it is, you need the whole process of how they can commission a pet portrait from you to be as easy as possible. So to do that, I would start by building a very, very simple website if you haven't done already. Literally, you could have a home page, an about me page, and like a contact me page. And on the home page, you could literally have the whole process of start to finish of what it's like if they commission a pet portrait, your sizes and prices, examples of your work, what your packaging looks like, and basically what they can expect throughout. You could also have this on your highlights on Instagram. So if someone clicks on your highlights, you can have like a few stories, literally step by step, as to how they can commission a pet portrait. Again, showing your prices, examples of your work, and finish off with a contact me page that it goes straight to your email. I think having set prices and set sizes really helps to reduce the amount of decisions that the client has to make. You don't want to be offering like a million different sizes and different prices for this, that and the other. Like, keep it fairly simple. I think mine at the minute, there probably is too many options, and I think it's worth reviewing your sizes and prices every 6 months or a year, depending on how far along you are in your business, and seeing what sizes people mainly book in, and maybe getting rid of the ones that aren't as popular. So you just stick in with the ones that you know are popular, and also be open if someone has a custom size that they want. Maybe they've got a frame at home that they really want a pet portrait to fit that frame. Be open to that as well. This is why I order the big sheets, because last month I actually did 4 cats in a row, and that was 12 by 24 inches. And I don't actually have that on my size list because it was a very like wide pet portrait, and I only really do ones like that every so often, so I didn't really have it included on my size list. But yeah, be open to like custom sizes and custom commissions as well. I think show yourself on social media. People can relate more to you as the artist, and they can kind of see who's actually creating their artwork, their custom artwork. Even if you don't feel comfortable with that, I think just documenting and posting loads of works in progress and finished pieces and reels, having a range of like dog breeds, cats, horses, whatever it is that you might be drawing or offering as a pet portrait artist, I think opens you up to more people, because they can see an example of a particular breed that you've drawn that they've got that they might want you to draw, or whatever it is. Just see Instagram or your Facebook page or TikTok, whatever it is, as an online portfolio. So if someone searches for you online, They can literally see loads of your work right there on social media, and it gives them an indication as to what they can expect and the standard of your work and everything like that. The next thing to consider is photos. So after you've got all your material sorted, after you've built up your social media a little bit, hopefully you should see more people starting to inquire about your work and ask about pet portrait commissions, and hopefully get a few more people booking in. So when someone's taken the time to message you or email you about potentially commissioning a pet portrait, you want them to feel like you really kind of getting to know the pet. So ask them loads of questions, have that communication all the way throughout. And I think the photos are actually a really good way to do that. So I always make sure that the photo that they're providing for me to draw from is at a high enough standard for me to draw from before I actually take on the commission. However, in some circumstances, if the pet has sadly passed away, they might only have a limited amount of photos, and I always try and work with them, see what they've got, and we'll come to some sort of agreement on the photos. I think it's helpful to have a photo guide on your website that people can refer to. I think I've got one that says like a good example, which is very close up, good quality, good natural lighting, so you can see loads of the details. And then next to it, I've got one that's not as good quality, which is quite far away. The lighting's not the best. You can't really see much detail. It's at a strange angle. And those things might seem obvious to you who's a creative and you kind of have an eye for that kind of thing anyway. But for someone who really has no idea with photography at all, just giving them that extra guidance so you produce a really good drawing and they get a really high quality pet portrait, I think is really important. I always tend to ask for 1 or 2 front facing angles in natural lighting, which is either outside or by a window. We want it to be really good quality and close up so you can see all the details. And I always ask for a few extra or for the client's favourites, which I think shows more of the personality of the pet. So I think it helps you capture their character in your drawing. With horses, I tend to ask for a side profile because I think you can get more of the face in. Because they're so like long and thin, if you draw them straight on, it can almost look a bit strange. So I always try and include a bit of the neck and a lot of their kind of side profile. But with dogs and cats, it's mainly like front facing. So once you've sorted the photos out, the next thing is deposits and actually booking them in. So I always tend to have about a 6-month waiting list. My commissions are always open and I take on around 4 to 6 commissions every month. But next year I'm going to drastically cut that down because I feel like it's not sustainable to be doing how much work and drawings I'm doing every single month. And I feel like I don't want to be on a constant treadmill trying to keep up with everything. I want to have a bit more spare time where I can spend building other parts of my business. And I think I'll always do commissions. I love doing commissions, but I'm just going to take on a lot less next year, I think. Anyway, with deposits, it's completely up to you, really. I take currently a £25 deposit that goes towards their pet portrait. If the commission is quite big and it's worth a lot more, sometimes I'll take a much higher deposit, but generally I'll take a £25 non-refundable deposit, which is basically to get them booked in and secure their place on my waiting list. Again, as of next year, I think I should be charging way more of a higher deposit, but because I've always done like £25 deposit and that's worked for me, I've just always kind of stuck with it. But I know that I should be probably charging a little bit more now. So anyone can book in a pet portrait at any time, but I'll just let them know when my next availability is. And if that works with them, I'll book them in 6 months' time when I'll start their pet portrait. I know some artists don't take on any commissions and they have the books closed for most of the year and then they'll open the books for like a couple of days, book in all the pet portraits at once, and then they've got the whole work set for the next 6 months up to a year. People like to do it different ways, but having them open all the time and having myself booked up for about 6 months is how I tend to do it. Also consider different payment plans, whether you want to be paid in instalments or you want to be paid in full once the portrait is complete. Again, it's completely up to you. Again, with me, a bit of both. It depends on how big the portrait is. It depends on the client, the options there. A big thing when it comes to being a pet portrait artist is communication with your client. Some clients want to be really involved in what you're doing, so they might want photo updates throughout, and some clients would rather not. They'd rather just be informed when you've started the pet portrait and then see the finished thing right at the end. I'll always tend to ask them because people are different, but I'll always confirm all the details before I actually start any drawing. Like the size, the photo I'll be working from, any little details that we've discussed to add into the portrait or take out of the portrait. So the next thing is the actual drawing. So like I said right at the start, with every single one you do, you will improve and you'll learn something different to take on to the next one. Some artists like to work on one pet portrait at a time. I tend to work on multiple pet portraits at a time. I like to do a few hours on one and then switch it up and do a few hours on another one. I think it gives you a set of fresh eyes kind of going from one to another. And although you're drawing for quite a long time, it gives you another little boost of motivation because you're working on something different. Make sure all your drawings are really protected if you do work on a couple at once. You don't want any risk of damage at all. I tend to put mine on the wardrobe when I'm working on them so I can constantly see all the ones that I'm working on at once. These actually aren't used for wardrobes. This was a spare bedroom that we turned into an art studio. So then wardrobes don't really get used. So it's basically just like having another wall. So I have all my works in progress on there so I can constantly see where I'm up to. I think constantly having your artwork surrounding you, sometimes you'll look at it after a day or so and something might just pop out to tweak or to alter. And I think if you're constantly just working on the same drawing for hours until you think it's finished, you might miss those little bits to tweak. I think it's good to have a bit of a break and then return to it with completely fresh eyes, because something that you might not see to change or to tweak one day, you might see it quite easily the next day. And then, like I said before, you want to document everything whilst you're drawing. I've got a desktop tripod from Amazon, which I always get so many questions about, because it is really good. It holds my phone and I can literally move it to where I want it to be. However, because I've had it for quite a while now, I think the bottom of it is kind of worn out a little bit. So when I'm drawing, especially doing tutorials on my drawing board, it does kind of go a little bit bouncy, which is not ideal. So I do need to get a new one that's a bit sturdier. So I wouldn't really recommend it, I don't think. But for reels and stuff like that, it is fine. But yeah, invest in studio equipment as well to help you document and record your work so you can post it on Instagram and stuff, because the drawing is one thing, but documenting everything and creating content and video and everything is another thing. So once you finish the pet portrait commission, you want to photograph the work and send it to the client. And you want to make sure that the quality of the photos are really good. I've got the iPhone 15 Pro and the camera is really, really good. One top tip as well is to always wipe the lens, wipe the actual camera, because it's surprising how much grease and grub gets on it. So just wipe it with a blanket or on your leggings or whatever, just to keep it clean. And it just keeps the lens clear, so when you take a picture it doesn't look cloudy. You also want to make sure that you're photographing it in natural lighting. So I'll always photograph it in the day, not first thing in the morning because the sun tends to come in here first thing in the morning, but early afternoon is the perfect lighting time if it's not torrential rain to photograph work. Anything after that, the light is very cool in here because the sun kind of goes to the other side of the house, so everything looks very blue. So yeah, consider the lighting. You don't want it to be too bright, right next to a window, but you don't want it to be too dark because you want it to pick up all those details. Think about different angles. Think about how the photo will look when you post it on social media too. So maybe put some pencils in the top corner to make it obvious that it's a drawing. But yeah, you want your photos that you send to your clients to be really professional. Watermarking your photos before sending them to a client is something else to consider as well. I do this, but I make it really subtle so it's not covering any details and it's not really, really obvious, but it is still there. So that's basically if you just have Becca Baron art over the top of your drawing, so they can't then save the image that you've sent them on email or whatever and print it out on paper or do whatever they want to do with it. I've never had that experience, but I can imagine that sometimes it does happen. But I also think if someone's paid a deposit and they've paid some instalments towards the portrait and you've had that communication throughout, it's not really a likely scenario, but it's just in case anything happens, just For your sake, watermark your photos that you send to your clients. And it can be really subtle, not very obvious. Just a little bit of your like branding or your name somewhere. The next thing is packaging. I'd love to do a full episode on packaging at some point. But yeah, packaging is something that definitely develops over time, as in the professionalism and what you use to package your work. It'll probably look a lot better the more that you've been doing it. So I always used to roll up my commissions with a business card, put it in a postage tube, and that was it. But that was good in terms of shipping abroad because it'd keep everything fairly cheap for me and for the client. And I still offer the tube, but now I mainly package my work up in a ribbon-tied box, and it's got a lid on it. I think I've shown you this in previous episodes or vlogs or whatever, but it's got a lid which kind of goes right around the edges, so it's that extra bit of protection. I buy my boxes from the Tiny Box Company and they are so good. I think mine are the photography boxes. They're under that section. But have a look because honestly, they're so good. And this isn't an ad or anything. It's literally just my recommendation. They always keep my commissions protected. I've sent them literally everywhere and I've not had any that have got damaged. Touch wood. Fingers crossed. I think next year I might end up upping my prices and including the packaging costs within that price. And at the minute I offer the clients either the tube or the box, the tube being the cheaper option. I might end up scrapping the tube and just having the boxes. But the boxes that I buy, they only go up to 12 by 16 inch, which is about A3 size. Any commissions that I do that are larger than that, I'll always roll them up in a postage tube. It keeps it cheap for the client and it prevents damage in the post. I think the larger artwork that you send with it being flat is more likely to get damaged because they'll just literally chuck it and throw things on it. And I feel like as much as you bubble wrap it, it's probably still likely to get damaged. But then again, that's never happened before with like large originals that I've sent. So when I send my large originals, obviously I send them flat because they're framed. But I think because the frame is quite sturdy and I literally sandwich it between multiple layers of cardboard and wrap it in like 20,000 rolls of bubble wrap, it's always been all right. Again, touch wood. But yeah, for now, the postage tube and the ribbon-tied boxes work for me in terms of commissions. I always give a stamped, signed and dated certificate of authenticity with the pet portrait, which is basically just like a signed document just saying that it's a completely authentic piece of work that you've done, that you have the copyright rights to, basically. I also give them a personalised thank you note and multiple business cards just in case they know anyone who might be interested. They might have someone go into the house and seeing your work on the wall and saying, oh, who's done that? And then they can give them a business card. I also give artwork protection instructions, which is basically saying don't keep the artwork in direct sunlight because it can discolour the paper over time. No matter how much you invest into the best quality materials, that can happen with anything. You might also want to consider mounting or framing your pet portraits. Personally, I don't do either. I wrap them in tissue paper and then put them in the box or roll it up in the tube. Again, next year, I might end up doing mounts. I think they do look really nice and they just kind of finish off the piece. I try and stay well clear of frames because everyone's got their own tastes. You might end up spending quite a bit of money getting it framed and then they might change it after a week to something that they prefer. And I think because mounts and frames are kind of together, I just kind of leave that up to the client. So I simply just send the portrait wrapped up in tissue paper, and that's worked for me so far. No one's actually said anything about mounts. It's mainly been frame questions or like where they can get a frame from, which I'll always help them with. But in terms of me providing the frame for them, I try and stay clear of that. One extra little thing, which I think is a nice like added bonus to the whole commissioning a pet portrait process for the client, is for you to make a video of their pet portrait kind of coming to life. So like I was saying before about filming and documenting what I'm working on, I'll always try and film snippets of the drawing throughout from start to finish, which I'll make into a short video reel that I'll post on social media, so then they can see more of the drawing process and literally see it from start to finish. I think that's just a nice added bonus to offer your client. Once the portrait has been shipped or posted to the client, I'll always give them the tracking number and I'll say, you know, send me a picture once you've got it framed and let me know when it's arrived safely. And it keeps that communication there, like after you've actually finished the pet portrait, because you never know, they might want another one in the future. So it's nice to kind of keep that contact. In terms of shipping, I get a lot of questions about shipping abroad and internationally. I use Royal Mail International tracked and signed for, so we can track the portrait all the way there. I can see where it is. Because, you know, when you're sending something that you've spent so many hours on, especially like a big portrait, you really don't want that to get lost and you don't want to have to do that again. So use a courier that you trust. I've always used Royal Mail. I have used UPS, is it UPS before? But the whole process for sending abroad was like so much paperwork and so much effort. Whereas Royal Mail, they make it dead easy. I always do all of my postage labels and everything and my custom forms online. You literally just work through it step by step. You can literally do it within like 2 minutes, if that. It's so easy. And it just simplifies the whole process for when you're sending things abroad. Especially this year, like I've always sent my portraits to the US and to Australia. Like I've got loads of clients there. But this year in particular, I've been sending them other places as well that I've never sent before, like Switzerland and the Netherlands and like random places like that. And they've all got there safely. Touch wood again. So yeah, hopefully that's given you a bit of an insight into kind of my process of being a pet portrait artist and some things to consider if you haven't done already. I always find it interesting listening to how other people kind of do things. So yeah, hope you've enjoyed this episode and you can take something from it. I think my main advice with being a commissioned pet portrait artist is to keep communication with your client, constantly post and show and document what you're doing. Have that professionalism from how you talk to your clients to your packaging, and value your time. So maybe your prices might start off really low, but make sure as your work develops and you improve the quality and the standard of your work, your prices are reflecting that. There's probably so many things I've missed off, but that's hopefully given you a general gist of what it's like to be a pet portrait commissioned artist, and like that whole side of things. And also if you want to go down that avenue, you're not just stuck to that either. There's so many different things you can do from that. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for watching if you've been watching on YouTube, and thank you so much for listening if you've been listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. I'll be back next week with a brand new episode, and I've also got a few more artists in the pipeline for upcoming episodes as well. If you've got any artists in particular that you want me to talk to, then comment below so I can hopefully get them on the podcast. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and thank you to Ella who sent me that lovely message this week all about how to be a pet portrait artist and the whole process. So hopefully this has helped. Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to my channel to see more art related content and future episodes. And I'd love it if you could leave a review if you've been listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. I hope you all have a lovely rest of the week, and I'll be back next week on Wednesday with a brand new episode.